Hi, welcome to Dr. Joe Academy. Sorry for the late start. I will be extending class by 3 minutes to make up for that last time. Let me just go ahead and get everything ready. Okay, just to make sure everyone could hear me as well as see the Google Slides presentation, can you please type 1 in the chat? Okay, and I sent in the link so everyone can join into the Google Slides. As usual, we're just going to go through the SAT questions, and similar to last week, we are going to be working on another creative writing activity before we get back into essay writing for the week after. So let's start off with the first question. Shannon, can you go ahead and read this question?
In revisiting the once dismissed hypothesis, the physicist was careful not to portray either critics as um, negligent. Instead, she described their objection as a product of the limited instrumentation available at that time, thereby blank their skepticism without fully endorsing it. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word?
Hey, Stanley, I just resent the link so you could join in, and then we'll proceed with the take-up for this response as well. All right, the correct answer for this question would be C. So let's go over why it would be C instead. Okay. Vocabulary in context. The correct answer is C because the physicist reframes earlier criticism as a product of limited tools. She neither fully agrees with critics nor dismisses them. She places their skepticism in historical context. And in this case, D would reject them outright. It would not be the correct answer. So therefore, C would be the best answer. Okay, let's take a look at the next question. Alina, can you please go ahead and read this question?
A longitudinal study tracking urban tree cover found that while neighborhoods with increased canopy density experienced measurable reductions in summer surface temperatures, the same neighborhoods did not exhibit statistically significant changes in annual energy consumption. Researchers suggest that behavioral factors may mediate the relationship between environmental improvements and utility use. Which choice best describes what the passage implies?
Okay, I did receive everyone's response for this. The correct answer is B. Okay, let's take a look at question 3. Dora, can you please go ahead and read this question?
For decades, scholars believed the manuscript to be a medieval forgery due to stylistic inconsistencies. Recent chemical analysis of the ink, however, date the document to the early 12th century. Blank, although questions about authorship remain unresolved, the manuscript can no longer be dismissed solely on the basis of age, which choice completes the text with the most logical transition.
The correct answer for question 3 would be A. Let's go over why it would be A instead. Correct answer would be A, consequently, because chemical analysis disproves the age-based forgery claim. The final sentence draws a logical conclusion from that new evidence. The manuscript cannot be dismissed solely due to age. B suggests similarity, which is incorrect. C signals contrast, but the final clause is a conclusion. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. This one's a little bit of a longer one. Stanley, can you please go ahead and read this question?
Student is writing about the economic impact of early railroads and wants to emphasize how they reshaped regional markets rather than merely accelerating transportation. Notes: Railroads reduced shipping time between inland farms and coastal ports. Farmers gained access to distant markets. Freight costs decreased over time. Some investors profited substantially from railroad expansion. Regional price differences narrowed after railroad construction. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish the student's goal?
I'm just waiting on one more response. Okay, great. Everyone was correct with this response. The right answer is B. Okay, and question 5. Alina, can you please go ahead and read this question?
Emerging from decades of archival obscurity, the letters were published in a comprehensive volume. Now, according to historians, blank the prevailing interpretation of the poet's political affiliations. Which choice completes the text so that it confirms the standard English conventions?
Okay, the correct answer would be A. So let's go over why it would be A instead. Okay, the correct answer would be A, challenge, because the subject of the verb is the comprehensive volume, which is singular. Therefore, the verb must be singular. And in the case of B, it would be plural, so it wouldn't be the correct answer. Okay, let's take a look at question 6. Shannon, can you please go ahead and read this question?
The reviewer praises the novel's spare prose, showing that the author avoids overt sentimentality. When a book's most emotional scenes are rendered with restraint that prevents them from feeling.
Okay, the correct answer for this would be D. So let's go over why it would be D instead. And for those of you that did join later, I did start the class 3 minutes late, so we'll be extending the class until 8:33. Just wanted to give a reminder. So the correct answer would be maudlin. And just to give some context, maudlin would be self-pitying. So the passage emphasizes restraint and avoidance of overt sentimentality. Maudlin means overly emotional or sentimental in a way that feels excessive or artificial. Like I described it as self-pitying, but yeah, even being excessively sentimental, just overdoing it. That's the energy you get from that. So that directly contrasts with restraint. And in the case of A, cathartic refers to emotional release, not excessive sentimentality. Let's take a look at the next question, question 7. Dora, can you please go ahead and read this question?
Researchers observed that students who annotated digital text remember more details than students who only highlighted. However, when the annotating group was instructed to write comments that merely rephrase the text, their advantage disappeared. The researchers proposed that the benefit came not from annotation itself, but from the kind of mental work it required.
Okay, great. The correct answer for this is B. Okay, and Stanley, can you please go ahead and read question number 8?
The archaeologist acknowledges that the inscription's grammar is irregular and that several characters are eroded blank. She argues that the remaining text aligns closely with known regional formulas, making a modern forgery unlikely. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition?
Okay, great. The correct answer for this is A. All right, let's take a look at question 9. Alina, can you please go ahead and read this question?
A student is writing about public health campaigns and wants to emphasize that small changes in message framing can meaningfully influence behavior. A 2022 study compared two text message reminders for vaccination appointments. One message emphasized personal benefit, the other emphasized protecting vulnerable community members. The Protect Others message increased attendance by 8%. Both messages were sent at the same time of day. The study controlled for age and prior vaccination status. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish the student's goal?
Okay, great. Everyone did get the correct answer. It is C. And Anna, I just resent the link so you can join into the Google Slides. All right, let's take a look at the 10th question. Anna, can you please go ahead and read this question?
The lab replicated the original experiment, but its results were less consistent. The researchers did not reject the initial claim outright. They argued that it required narrower conditions.
Okay, I did get everyone's response. The correct answer is C. All right, let's take a look at question 11. Shannon, can you please go ahead and read this question?
Although the philosopher is often described as a radical, argument in this essay is more measured than critics suggest. Rather than rejecting traditional frameworks outright, she seeks to blank them by exposing their internal tension.
Okay, let's take up this question. The correct answer for this would be C. So let's go over why it would be C instead. My apologies. Give me a second. Yeah, the correct answer would be C, refine. The passage states the philosopher does not reject traditional frameworks outright, but exposes their internal tensions. That suggests improving or sharpening them rather than destroying them. Refine means to improve by making small adjustments, whereas dismantle implies tearing everything apart, and that's not exactly what is happening out there. Okay, and let's take a look at question 12. Alina, can you please go ahead and read this question?
A study comparing printed textbooks with digital versions found that students using print performed slightly better on questions requiring sequential reasoning. However, when the digital version was reformatted to minimize scrolling and reduce on-screen distractions, the performance gap narrowed substantially. What choice best describes what the passage implies?
Okay, I'm just waiting on one more response. Okay, the correct answer is B. So let's go over why it would be B instead. The correct answer is B, because the performance gap narrowed when digital design factors were improved. This implies digital text can approach print effectiveness if properly designed. In the case of C, it is unsupported, so therefore it would not be correct. Let's take a look at question 13. Anna, can you please go ahead and read this question?
The initial hypothesis appeared consistent with prior research. Blank's subsequent replication attempts yielded inconsistent results, complicating the original claim. Which choice completes the text so it conforms to standard English conventions?
Okay, the correct answer for question 13 would be D. So let's go over why it would be D instead. All right, the correct answer would be D, which is however. Both clauses are independent. A conjunctive adverb like however must be preceded by a semicolon and followed by a comma when linking independent clauses. A and B lacks proper separation. Okay, let's take a look at the next question, question 14. Stanley, can you please go ahead and read this question?
A student is writing about early telegraphic system and wants to emphasize how they reshape information flow rather than merely increasing communication speed. Note, telegraph Messages travels faster than mail delivery. Businesses could receive price updates from distant markets. News reports spread nationally within hours. Telegraph infrastructure requires significant investment. Some rural regions lacked immediate access. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish the student's goal?
Shannon, go ahead. Do you have a question?
I have a question on the last problem. Like I was a little bit confused because like in the passage they already had a semicolon and comma. So I don't know if I was supposed to put like A or D.
Okay, I get what you mean. So like technically it would be like this blank kind of covers this whole area. And since, we're looking at the word however, we know it's going to be however no matter what. Like looking through all the options A to D, it's not like they give different words, so we know however is going to be the word choice. But yeah, I understand what you mean. I get that as well. So yeah, don't take it too seriously. I'll just underline the full thing. But yeah, thanks for
Okay.
letting me know. It should have just been
Mhm.
underlined so everyone understood.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just waiting on two more responses for this question. Okay, great. The correct answer for this is B. All right, and let's take a look at the last question. Alina, can you please go ahead and read this question?
By the time the policy was formally implemented, several municipalities blank pilot programs that tested similar regulations, providing evidence of their efforts. Which choice completes the text that conforms to standard English convention?
Okay, just waiting on 2 more responses to be sent in. All right, now just waiting on the last answer to be sent in. Okay, Alina, I have not received your response yet, but we're just going to move on to the next activity. The correct answer for this would be A. All right, let's take a look at the writing activity we're going to be working on. Let me just full screen this. All right, we're just going to go through some slides, and I think we'll have about 20 minutes to work on the writing activity. They'll give us roughly about 15 plus 3 minutes, 18 minutes to take it up, which I think will finally be enough where we could read everyone's responses. So please, everyone, do make sure you send it in on time. Strong writing avoids naming emotions directly. Instead of telling the reader what a character feels, skilled writers create situations in which emotion is implied through gesture, silence, posture, and environment. Kind of similar to what we were working on last week, but we're just building on it. When a writer states he was angry, the reader receives information. When a writer shows a glass set down too hard, a jaw tightening, or a pause before answering, the reader experiences the emotion. Subtext is the tension between what is said and what is meant. Dialogue should rarely function as pure explanation. Characters often hide, deflect, exaggerate, or soften what they truly think. The most powerful moments in fiction occur when readers recognize meaning beneath the surface of the words. As you write, remove direct emotional labels. Replace them with physical detail, rhythm, and reaction. If a character is ashamed, show what they avoid looking at. If they are jealous, show what they notice. Emotional precision requires restraint. Controlling pacing and narrative focus. Pacing determines the weight of a moment. If everything moves quickly, nothing feels important. If everything moves slowly, the story loses momentum. Effective writers vary speed intentionally. Transitions, travel, and minor changes can be compressed into brief sentences, but turning points deserve expansion. Slow down when the stakes rise. Stretch time by describing sensory detail, internal thought, and hesitation. Allow the reader to sit inside the moment. Consider how sentence length shapes rhythm. Short sentences create urgency. Longer, layered sentences create reflection. Pacing is not accidental. It is structural control. When revising, identify the most important emotional moment in your piece. That is where you must decelerate, and deepen. Specific detail as a character revelation. Vague description weakens credibility. Specific detail creates immersion. However, detail should exist not randomly. They should reveal something about the character's perspective. Two people entering the same room will notice different things. A nervous person might notice exits. A guilty person might notice who is watching. A nostalgic person might notice faded photographs. The details selected should reflect the character's state of mind. Avoid overloading description. Choose precise, concrete images that suggest mood without explaining it. A flickering light is more effective than writing the room felt tense. The environment should echo the emotional condition of the scene. Constructing authentic internal conflict. Meaningful narratives often hinge on internal struggle rather than dramatic action. Internal conflict occurs when a character desires two incompatible outcomes. This tension must feel genuine, not superficial. To construct believable conflict, identify what your character values most. Then create a situation in which that value is threatened by another equally important desire. The character should hesitate. They should rationalize. They should imagine consequences. The struggle should unfold through thought patterns, memories, and small behavioral shifts. Avoid simplistic dilemmas with obvious moral answers. Complexity strengthens realism. Readers should understand why either choice could be justified. The weight of the story lies in the psychological process leading to the decision. So the writing assignment is to write a 200 to 300 word narrative similar to what we did last week, but this takes place immediately after something significant has already happened. The event itself should not be shown. Instead, focus only on the aftermath. It could be moments after, it could be a day after, months after. All that matters is this is the aftermath, almost like the moment of reflection for the character. As mentioned, this could be minutes after an argument, a performance, a breakup, a public mistake, a confession, or a decision. And I just want to write over here, it could be minutes, days, or months after, and just to give everyone that option in terms of what they're writing. Your story should capture the emotional residue of the event without directly explaining everything that occurred. Readers should be able to infer what happened through physical details, silence, fragmented thoughts, or small actions. And some of you did really excellent jobs with that, like did a really excellent job with that last week. From what I remember, some stories were really powerful, and a lot of information that we were able to pick up was not directly and explicitly told to us. It was something we had to pick up by reading and making inferences, which is really good. And we're kind of just applying the same skills over here and trying to do it again just one more time before we move on to mini essays for next week. Limit the setting to one location and keep the time frame narrow. Slow down the moment and show the character processing what just unfolded. Avoid dramatic reactions or exaggerated language. Let tension exist in restraint. Your goal is to demonstrate control of subtext, pacing, and specificity by making the aftermath feel heavier than the unseen event itself. Oh, I'm sorry. This was before. So last week we kind of did the moment before collapse. This is practically the moment after that we're working on, just to kind of give some context. From what I remember, I think all of you were here last week, but I'm not too sure. Maybe one of you were missing. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate the slides. It is 8 o'clock, so it gives you roughly about 15 minutes. I didn't think the instructions would take so long to go through. And before we get started, does anyone have any questions about this activity? Okay, I'm guessing everyone's good to go. Again, we only have 15 minutes we're working on for the writing. That way we use the next 15 minutes to take it up. So everyone, please try to just complete that portion of your story. It should be approximately 200 to 300 words, but more than the words, just make sure you're writing in a way where you don't directly state the emotions, but you're able to let the audience feel the emotions. I just wanted to give a reminder that in 3 minutes we will be taking up this activity. I would like everyone to send their responses into the chat and start pasting it onto the slides once they do get a chance. Yeah, the time is 8:15. Can everyone please go ahead and send in their responses? Okay, Shannon, can you go ahead and read your response?
She locked herself in her room before anyone could ask how it went. Her dress lay in a pile on the floor, glitter catching the light like silent mockery. She sat at her desk, staring at nothing, replaying the humiliation in sharp, unwanted flashes. Not the mistake itself, but the looks, the polite nods, the subtle laughs, the way conversation shifted when she walked by. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she touched some mascara dripping down her face. Her phone lit up with messages. She didn't open them. For a while, she let the embarrassment sit heavy in her chest, hot and suffocating. Then slowly, the world continued anyway. The hum of traffic outside, a dog barking down the street, her mother calling for her for dinner.
Okay, great job. I just want to go through some small changes first before I get into the point of improvements, starting off with, where is it? Okay, embarrassment set heavy inner chest. It should be heavily inner chest. So we'll just make that correction heavily. Okay, I'll just highlight this red. Okay, and the way the conversation shifted when she walked by. And even over here, when she looked at herself in the mirror, she touched the mascara dripping down her face. We could just write that was or put a comma, but it would be better to put that was dripping down her face. Okay, and I also wanted to highlight out some sentences. For example, this sentence over here, she let the embarrassment sit heavily in her chest. I'm just gonna underline this, if anything. Yeah, I'm gonna underline this, and then right beside, I'm gonna write why I underlined it. And the main reason is because this sentence is very close to naming the emotions directly. The earlier details about looks, nods, and subtle laughs are stronger because they imply humiliation without naming it. So you should kind of almost do the same over here because this is very close to directly stating out the emotion in the situation. I'm just going to write this is too close to directly stating the emotion. Try to follow your earlier method of more subtle cues. Okay, and I would also suggest that you could perhaps maybe deepen her internal thought. For example, what specific memory replays the loudest? A single sharper detail would intensify the realism of the scene. So I'm just going to write over here, try to intensify her internal thoughts. For example, what specific memory replays the loudest? Okay, and Shannon, do you have any questions about the points of improvement that we just went over?
No.
Okay. Okay, Anna, can you please go ahead and read your response?
The email is still open on my laptop, the screen flickering in and out as if it's breathing. My bedroom is the same too. Unmade bed, backpack lying open on the floor, water glass dripping onto my desk. But it all feels like it's been moved an inch to the left. The subject line is at the top of the screen, admits indecision. I've already clicked on it 3 times, like it might vanish if I don't keep looking at it. I forgot to italicize that. We are pleased. The text pulses softly against the white background. There's no confetti animation, no music playing, just a soft whir of my computer fan. Down the hall, a cabinet door closes. My name floats through the house, careful and measured. I don't answer right away. Instead, I scroll back to the top of the message, rereading the name. No uniforms, no grand hallway. Just this room, this chair pressing into the back of my legs. I catch my reflection faintly in the dark edge of the screen, eyebrows slightly raised, like I'm waiting for someone else to react first.
Okay, I just want to go over some changes with this response. In terms of this sentence, the email is still open on my laptop, the screen flickering in and out as if it's breathing. This is supposed to be, it's two different independent clauses. So therefore, when you put the comma, it becomes a comma splice. I'm just gonna instead, okay, just make this red and separate these sentences. And I'll write in between independent clause or two independent clauses becomes comma splice. And I see the effect you're going for here in terms of a parallel structure, but it kind of lacks that effect because you don't use the correct articles before each noun. Instead, it would be better if you write an unmade bed, a backpack, sorry, a backpack lying open on the floor, a water glass dipping onto my desk. And I would honestly end off the sentence right over there and then make this its own sentence. But it all feels like it's been moved. And we'll just get rid of this, honestly. But it all feels like it's been moved an inch to the left. Okay. Okay, I would say definitely the sensory detail here is very strong. So great job with that. But in terms of internal depth, there's not too much that's shown. So consider adding a brief internal thought. Internal thought that reveals why the character hesitates to react. Okay, and Anna, do you have any questions about the provided points of improvement?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really not sure what's happening with Google Slides today. It's like it's moving much slower. Okay, and all right, Stani, I'll let you finish up with your last sentence. Let me paste in someone else's response. And just want to give a reminder that we are extending class by 3 minutes. So most likely we'll take this. I mean, we're going to be ending off class at 8:33 instead of the usual 8:30. Just want to give a reminder. Okay, and let me just split this up into 2 slides before we go through this. Okay, Alina, can you go ahead and read your response? I'm sorry, just give me a second. My computer is being so weird. Okay, Alina, can you go ahead and read your response?
The hallway was too quiet. Bob stood by his open locker, the nasty scent of old gym clothes and dust suddenly nauseating. He stared at a crumpled flyer for prom that had been shoved into the corner of the top shelf. It looked like trash now. It was just a piece of trash, but looking at it made his jaw ache. He didn't turn around to watch the retreating footsteps, but he could still feel the weight of the air between him and I meant to write duh, but I forgot. And the retreating figure, the way it curdled the moment the words were out. The secret was out. What a poorly kept one it was truly. Bob was almost stunned by his own ignorance. Years of hanging out on the weekends, playing video games until 1 a.m. were all washed away just like that. He reached into his locker and pulled out a worn-out hoodie that wasn't his. He'd meant to return it for weeks, but now how could he? He looked at the frayed cuffs with the small DIY patches and felt a surge of irritation. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't asked for the stirring the damp palms like Bob was a prize rather than a real person. With a slow, deliberate shove, he pinched the hoodie between his forefingers and tossed it into the nearest trash can and slammed the door of his locker. The sound echoed down the empty corridor, leaving him alone in the hallway with his haggard backpack draping over his shoulders.
Okay, really good job with your response. I just want to go over some small changes. Seen something over here. Yeah. So instead of on the weekends, you could just leave it as on weekends. So we'll just take that out. And over here. Okay, this sentence, he hadn't asked for the stuttering, the damp palms, like Bob was a prize rather than a real person. It just sounds a slight bit awkward. Instead, we could just write, he hadn't asked for the stuttering. Okay, we'll remove the comma and then we'll write, or the damp palms. Yeah, okay, no, he hadn't asked for the stuttering or the damp palms, like Bob was a prize rather than a real person. Okay, I just want to, yeah, instead we could change this to, I'm just thinking, maybe we could write for being treated like a prize rather than a real person. For being treated like a prize rather than a real person. Yeah, let's do that. For being treated like a prize rather than a real person. Okay, and yeah, those were the main changes I wanted to make. In terms of improvement, the story hints at a secret, but the nature of the secret still kind of remains big, and it's good, where it's better to be more ambiguous than direct, but at the same time, we want to have some sort of an emotional anchor. So I would say a slightly clearer emotional anchor would strengthen the stakes. Yeah, that's the main thing I wanted to add over here. And Alina, do you have any questions about the points of improvement that we went over? Okay, thanks for letting me know. Okay, and okay, Dora, can you go ahead and read your response? Just give me a second. Let me just move it up slightly. Yeah, can you go ahead and read it?
The apartment feels smaller without your shoes by the door. The space where they used to sit is clean, too clean, like it's been waiting to be noticed. I keep my jacket on even though it is very hot. It feels wrong to feel comfortable. Your mug is still in the sink. I rinse it, then set it on the drying rack instead of the cabinet as if you might ever come back for it. The clock above the stove ticks unevenly. I try to fix it, then realize I don't care if I ever do. I open my phone and scroll past your name. It's strange how easily it slides by now, just another word among many. No combination of sentences could capture how I feel. Outside, laughter rises from the sidewalk and fades. Life is moving at its usual pace, unbothered. I stay seated, listening to the sound of the apartment settling, pipes clicking, walls breathing. When I finally stand, I carry the mug to the cabinet and place it on the highest shelf. It doesn't belong there, but neither do I.
Okay, great job. So starting off with, I just wanted to go over which one is the jacket sentence. Instead of saying very hot, we can say even though it's warm inside. Just because very hot just feels, yeah, it's too big in my opinion. So let's cross that out. Though it's, and in general, using words like very, it's always best to avoid them, especially when it comes to creative writing, because most often you can find a better place to just, better word to just replace that, like worm instead. So even though it's warm inside. Okay, and next sentence is one with, Okay, I actually want to come back to this sentence over here. The space where they used to sit is clean, too clean, like it's been waiting to be noticed. And you could tell just by my pauses that the pauses aren't just commas, they should really be periods. And it's not even in terms of grammatical correctness. What you wrote is already grammatically correct. Just going to see if I can cross this out. But the reason I'm doing this is because it has a better effect overall. Breaking into shorter fragments strengthens the emphasis and the pacing as well. And as mentioned, like you should have a variety of sentences when needed, when those effects are needed. And this is one of those situations. So we'll end off this sentence right over here as well. Too clean, put a period there, and then we'll make this into a third sentence. Like it's been waiting to be noticed. And there's another sentence over here which is too close to naming the emotion directly. No combination of sentences could capture how I feel. We could try wording a sentence similar to that and write it out instead. Instead, we could write, no sentence could hold what I'm trying not to say. This preserves the idea that there's a lot of emotion involved, but at the same time, it makes it more emotionally layered and less abstract, which is better. It anchors it down more into the real moment. Just the feeling of not knowing what to say, which is relatable to a lot of people. And just to briefly go over some points of improvement, just like that sentence we corrected, we can focus a little bit more on being less direct. But in general, I do think your work already kind of does that. The atmosphere is also affected, but adding one more concrete sensory detail would also help with the immersion. So I'll probably rate just that one point after at the end. It is 8:34, Stanley. I'm going to be reading your response right after class, so in the next 5 minutes. In terms of the weekly writing assignment, the topic is justice and its limits. Society often claims to value justice. Courts, laws, and institutions are designed to create fairness and protect rights. However, justice is not always applied equally. In some cases, legal systems reflect bias, power, or public pressure rather than true fairness. We could even just see the recent documents that have been exposed or not exposed have been publicly made available. And we can see the fact that even the president of the United States, for example, should be someone who's arrested for what has happened, right? But certain things have not been done because the justice system is not always as fair as it seems to be. So you're going to be writing an analytical essay that explores this, and most likely we'll have a topic similar to this for next week's class. And I'm sorry that we did extend far into class. It is 8:35. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss everyone. I hope everyone has a great week ahead of themselves. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.